Hello and welcome back to Answering Bart Ehrman. And today we are looking at another bunch of contradictions that Bart Ehrman claims are there to do with the resurrection narrative. And I hear people use this type of argument. So it's going to be a great episode, Matthew, as we look at these. And do you want to kick us off by giving us our first reading?
Yeah, of course. So we're on page 47, and we'll begin at the heading, the resurrection narratives. So he says, nowhere are the differences among the Gospels more clear than in the accounts of Jesus' resurrection. I often have my first-year students do a simple comparison exercise in which they list everything said in each of the four Gospels about the events between the time Jesus was buried and the end of the Gospels. There can be no better introduction to the idea of horizontal reading. There are scads of differences among the four accounts, and some of these differences are discrepancies that cannot be readily or ever reconciled. Students find this a valuable exercise because I'm not simply telling them there are differences between the accounts. They discover the differences themselves and try to make sense of them. Great.
Okay. So what's he saying there? He's saying that with his students, he gets them to do this parallel reading, and that he does this on the resurrection accounts, and according to Bart, there's all these contradictions there. So look, the first thing I want to say is that Christians have been doing this for a long time, right?
Putting the gospel side by side,
putting the gospel side by side. So one of the first men that we know who did it was a man named Tatian, who made a book called the Diatessaron, where he puts all of the gospels sort of together in this way. And that's in the 2nd century.
100 years after the gospels were written, kind of thing.
100 years after the gospels are written. And then I've got this book here. This is called the NIV Harmony of the Gospels. And they actually do the parallel reading as well. I don't know if you can see that there, but maybe you can sort of see how it puts it in parallel columns.
So four gospels side by side,
the point I just want to make is that Christians have been doing this for a long time to learn. It's part of our Bible study to do this. So it's not just something that critical scholarship does. This is normal Christian devotional reading.
Mm-hmm. And Christians have been concerned to observe the consistencies between them as well for 1900 years as well, haven't they? So the sort of scholarly side of it, the devotional side of it, it's a complementary exercise for Christians and has been for a very long time. So it's not what Ehrman's doing here is great, getting side by side and comparing them. That's something we're fans of.
Yes, we're all for that. Now, he claims that there's all these irreconcilable contradictions. We'll have a look at those in a moment. Across the next two paragraphs, which we're not going to read out, he looks at textual criticism and sort of makes comments which he's already done before.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to follow that up, he talks about not having the original manuscripts and those types of things. We're not going to go through that because we did that when we looked at pages 15 to 16, if you wanted to follow that up. Mm-hmm. But then he moves on to, where are we? With that detail. Can you read that for us, please, where he now starts to give the examples?
Yeah, we're going to go through, I think, 8 examples or comparative examples and questions he raises. So this is midway down page 48. He says, with that detail out of the way, what can we say about the resurrection narratives in the 4 canonical accounts? All 4 Gospels agree that on the 3rd day after Jesus' crucifixion and burial, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and found it empty. But on virtually every detail, they disagree. And so here's his first question. He says, who actually went to the tomb? Was it Mary alone, John 20, verse 1, Mary and another Mary, as in Matthew 28:1, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Salome, as in Mark 16, verse 1, or women who had accompanied Jesus from Galilee to Jerusalem, possibly Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women, Luke 24, verse 1. And that's the question. So he's laid out some examples and some options there with some Bible passages, so we could put those up on the screen to engage with that.
Put them up. And I just want to say straight up, there's absolutely no problem here at all. So he is right. In Matthew, you can see there in Matthew, it talks about Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb. And in Mark 16, It talks about Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices. So he's right that there are multiple women spoken there. But he says at the start, was it Mary alone in John chapter 20, verses 1 and 2? I'm not going to read the whole of it there, but you can see, just read the last part. So she, that is Mary, ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken our Lord out of the tomb. And notice this, and we do not know where they have laid him. And my point is, John only mentions Mary Magdalene, but when Mary speaks, she says, we don't know. So, Bart Ehrman is saying here that John is saying it was Mary alone. In fact, that's what he specifically says, Mary alone. But if he just read the actual account, Mary herself testifies that she's not alone. Right?
She's speaking on behalf of unnamed others.
There are others. And so there were a whole lot of women who went, and in various ways their names are included, but he's just simply wrong to say that John says Mary alone. It just doesn't say that. All right. Do you want to take us to our second point?
Yep. Yeah. So the second question, be quicker. It says, had the stone already been rolled away from the tomb, as in Mark 16, verse 4, or was it rolled away by an angel while the women were there? Matthew 28, verse 2.
Okay. So did the women not see? Was it rolled away already, or did the women actually see it being rolled away?
When was it rolled away?
When was it rolled away? So let's have a look at this. Let's see, go down to, where are we here? He's correct that in Mark, it says, who will roll the stone away for us when they get to the entrance? But in Matthew, it actually doesn't say that the women saw the stone being rolled away. I'll just read it out. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the angels trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. Now, I guess I just want to point out here that it doesn't say that, it doesn't record what the women saw. It says that the angel came down, rolled back the stone, and then it just says the angel was speaking to the women. It's ambiguous. It doesn't say, and the women saw the stone being rolled back. I mean, he's creating this. Yeah.
It describes some things that happened and doesn't give a precise timeline. There's some tense form things going on there in the original Greek, but essentially it's just talking about particular audiences and some things that happened, and doesn't try to locate them precisely in a timeline.
No.
So there isn't a problem there. It doesn't actually assert the women watched that happen.
Yeah, exactly. If it said the women saw it in one and the women didn't see it in the other, you'd have a problem. But it just doesn't say that. Again, he's reading into it something that's not there.
To make it disagree,
Can you do our third example, please?
Yep. So it says, whom or what did they see there? Was it, and here's his options, an angel, as in Matthew 28, verse 5, a young man, as in Mark 16, verse 5, or two men, Luke 24, verse 4, or nothing and no one, as in John.
Okay, well, let's have a look at these. Now, he is right in Matthew 28, verse 5. As you can see there, the angel said to the women, don't be afraid. In Mark 16, verse 5, it says, a young man was sitting by the right side, dressed in a white robe. So there's a young man. Luke says, while they were perplexed about this, behold, two men stood there by them in dazzling apparel. Now, again, there's no problem here. In all of them, there is this person or persons. I guess let's look at number first of all. So is there a difference in number? So Matthew and Mark both just have a man. Now, when it says a man was sitting there and spoke to them, that's not saying there was only one man. right? So Luke tells us that there were two. Matthew and Mark just says they saw a young man. There could have been two men. Matthew and Mark are not being specific. If Matthew and Mark said there was only one and Luke said there was two, you'd have a contradiction. If it just says they saw a young man, then that's not saying there's not two. So there's no problem with number. And secondly, Bart says, are they angels or are they men? Well, if you look at Luke 24, it says that the men had dazzling apparel. That is, the men didn't look like ordinary men. Yeah. They're dazzling in their appearance. So, yes, they're men, but they're men who are dazzling. And so it's just different ways of describing angels. That's all.
We should be familiar with the phenomenon of the Bible describing angels as appearing as men or looking as just normal people, at least at some point. And so that's not something that should be surprising in general terms anyway. But the John's Gospel one is a really odd thing to say, isn't it, Sam? Saying they saw, because he's saying that John's Gospel asserts that they saw nothing and no one. Yeah. But really what he should say is John doesn't even mention this.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. To say John asserts that they didn't see it is just simply not what John says. And again, as scholars point out, John seems to be written in the light of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so he's not always just trying to repeat everything. Sometimes he has an assumed knowledge from those other books and he's just giving other information. Anyway, look, we'll keep moving. What is our... Now, hang on, let me just get down to here.
The fourth one.
The fourth one.
And it says, so he goes on and asks this question. He says, and what were they told? This is the women. What were they told? To tell the disciples to go to Galilee where Jesus will meet them, as in Mark 16, verse 7, or to remember that Jesus had told them while he was in Galilee that he had to die and rise again, as in Luke 24, verse 7. So there's two texts there that I think we've got to put up on the screen to compare.
Yeah, so what have we got here? Well, these are not contradictory in any way. They're just different parts of the same conversation. If one was saying, I don't know, if they're saying contradictory things, then you'd have a point. But they're just different aspects of the same conversation. He's telling them to go to Galilee in one, and in the other, he's saying, remember that he said to you that this was going to happen. When he was in Galilee, he told you this was going to happen. And so he's now telling them to go there. And
we shouldn't even assume that every line of dialogue has been recorded here, right? Like it's picked out certain things that they've reported, but the conversation would have inevitably included sentences that we haven't got in the New Testament accounts. And that's totally fine too. It shouldn't be surprising.
Yes, and look, I think you just raised a great point there, and we're going to see this in the final quote for today, that this goes on over hours or days.
Yeah.
In fact, we're going to see that the whole thing goes over for 40 days. And so there's many conversations, and each gospel writer is picking up certain things.
There's lots of appearances of Jesus, and the responses to Jesus' resurrection appearances unfolds over time for different people. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, should we look at the next one, number 5?
Yeah, number 5.
Yep. Says, then do the women tell the disciples what they saw and heard, as in Matthew 28, verse 8, or do they not tell anyone, as in Mark 16, verse 8?
Okay. So what have we got here? I want to say there's no contradiction at all. Mark has an incredibly short ending, and we may not even have the full ending of Mark, but Mark just ends with the women running off and it just stops. Matthew, Luke, and John actually give us more detail and tell us that the women, they do run off, but then they do tell the disciples. I mean,
Mark just records their initial reaction, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's clear that they had conversations later anyway, because we're reading the gospel that's about the risen Jesus, and they were the first witnesses to it. I mean, and so that's no surprise to anyone really. It's really what would happen in the next verse if there was another one. It's claiming more than what the text allows.
Yeah, exactly. So if Mark continued and said, hang on. So if Mark continued and said, and the women never told anybody, then you have a point. But it just says that the women ran off in fear and didn't tell anyone. And actually, it reminded me of when Jesus sends out his disciples, and he sends them out to speak, but he says, don't talk to anyone on the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got a task to go and to go and do a particular job, but they're not to talk to people, on the way. Until they get to the place they need to go. I've forgotten where that is now, but it's that idea of they're traveling. It's their initial response. They're heading off to see the disciples, and they're not telling anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
All right, number 6.
Yeah. So what have we got there?
So it's the women, questions about the women. It says, bottom of page 48, if they tell someone, whom do they tell? Is it the 11 disciples, as in Matthew 28, verse 8, the 11 disciples and other people, as in Luke 24, verse 8, Simon Peter and another unnamed disciple, as in John 20, verse 2? So there's 3 options we've been given. I think you've got those to put on the screen there.
Yeah, let's pop those up.
Yeah.
Again, I just don't see any problem here. One, they run and tell the disciples in Matthew.
Yep.
In Luke, they go and talk to the 11 and to all the rest. Well, to the 11 and all the rest is just a way of talking about the disciples. That's exactly the same as Matthew. It's just giving a bit more detail, the 11 and the rest.
Yep.
And then in John, it says, she goes and sees Simon Peter and the other disciple. Well, Luke actually has that as well. I have to say, though, that John does have this a little bit earlier in his account. It's exactly the same account. He's got it a little bit earlier. But again, he's giving different details. And so there's really no problem here. The Gospels are giving complementary information, and so there's just no problem.
Yeah, different levels of specificity in what they describe, mostly. Yeah, what's going on here. Yeah, okay. And the 7th one, the last of the short ones. What do the disciples do in response? Do they have no response because Jesus himself immediately appears to them? That's Matthew, he says 20, but it's actually Matthew 28, verse 9. Do they not believe the women because it seems like an idle tale, as in Luke 24:11, or do they go to the tomb to see for themselves, as in John 20, verse 3?
Okay, so what's his point here? So what was their initial what's their response?
The disciples, yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at this. So in Matthew, he greets the disciples, and they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Okay. And the other women told these. So in one, you've got Jesus talking to his disciples. In the other, it's the women telling the disciples.
Yep.
And then in the other, it's Peter going out with the other disciple to the tomb. Again, he's sort of taking different parts of the story and just comparing them.
Yeah.
When we've sort of been showing over and over that they do fit and they're picking up different aspects.
There's no reason these things can't all happen at different times in the process. Yeah. Yeah.
And so Luke is just giving more information than Matthew does. Okay. When we read in John's gospel, we have Jesus. We have Jesus coming to the disciples. I'm not really sure what to say with this, except that this is just complementary information over a whole day of what's happening, and they're just picking up different aspects of how Jesus is sending people and making himself known to them.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, agree.
So I don't really see a problem there. All right, let's look at the last one.
But this is his big one. So this is a actual paragraph on a last point. He says, one point in particular seems to be irreconcilable. In Mark's account, the women are instructed to tell the disciples to go meet Jesus in Galilee, but out of fear, they don't say a word to anyone about it. In Matthew's version, the disciples are told to go to Galilee to meet Jesus, and they immediately do so. He appears to them there and gives them their final instruction. But in Luke, the disciples are not told to go to Galilee. They're told that Jesus had foretold his resurrection while he was in Galilee during his public ministry. And they never leave Jerusalem in the southern part of Israel, a different region from Galilee in the north. On the day of the resurrection, Jesus appears to two disciples on the road to Emmaus. Later that day, the disciples tell the others that they have seen what they have seen, and Jesus appears to all of them. And then Jesus takes them to Bethany on the outskirts of Jerusalem and gives them their instructions, and it sends to heaven.
That's probably enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail here anyway, but the discrepancy right at the bottom, if it's really, do the disciples immediately go to Galilee and see Jesus, or do they stay in Jerusalem for the whole time until Pentecost?
And that's a fair enough question.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
That's a fair enough question. So, again, I want to come back to a point we've been making here. We need to understand that what we're getting at the end of each gospel and the commissioning that comes after it is a very short retelling of events that happened over a 40-day period.
Yep.
So let me just read you from Acts chapter 1, verse 3. He presented himself alive to them after his sufferings by many proofs, appearing to them during 40 days and speaking about the kingdom of God. So, and we see this with the Apostle Paul when he's retelling what he heard from the Jerusalem church. He says, Jesus appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, then he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. Now, there's a whole lot of commissionings. There's a whole lot of appearings in there, which we just don't have at the end of the Gospels.
Yeah.
Right? We've got Cephas and the 12. That's in the Gospels. But then he appeared to more than 500. We don't have that in the Gospels. Then he appeared to James, so to his brother, and to other apostles. We don't have those. And then we have him appearing to the Apostle Paul. Well, we've got that at in the book of Acts. And so my point here is that this is happening over many days, and the Gospels are giving a very short summary and just picking up one aspect of these many appearances of Jesus and the particular commissioning that he gave at that time to a certain group.
Yeah. They're not trying to set out some comprehensive account of Jesus' post-resurrection appearances, are they?
No.
They give a couple of examples that are in the context that they're writing, in the particular letters and books they're writing, are useful for that particular occasion, and they don't go on to catalogue the rest because it's really not the point. They're trying to testify about what happened and why is it important. Jesus is risen. What's that? Why is that important? It changes everything.
Yes. And we even have at the end of John's Gospels that Peter and some of the other disciples go out to return to fishing. And so, over the days and the months after Jesus is resurrected, the disciples, it would seem, have doubts. We read about them having doubts in Matthew as well. Yeah. But they're having doubts, and so Jesus is having to bring them on board. So there's a whole lot of things happening here, and the bottom line is, if you read the Gospels, they're all saying that Jesus was crucified, they're all saying that he died, and they're all saying that he was resurrected, right? So there's absolutely no contradiction there. And then they're bringing up different complementary information and commissionings to finish up the gospel account.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that we'll finish up soon.
Yeah. I was just going to say there's lots of good questions people could ask, but we'd say that there are good answers to them, basically. So ask your questions and look for good answers.
Yeah, so, okay, well then that's it for today. We'll see you next week. Next week we'll have a special episode, so make sure you come back for that, and we will see you then.